Hello, good people. I'm Natalie Kunsman, MD, and I have a lot of discussions planned for our future, and some of them will be Q&A style, and some of them will be demonstration style. But I thought today we would have a group session and a fireside chat. And today's topic is personalized medicine and epigenetics. Personalized medicine is a little bit different than personalized care because personalized care is a style of healthcare delivery that is typically talked about in a population approach that hospital systems to create to take care of a patient population. I practice a personalized style of medicine, which is individualized to your specific needs, and there are many factors to consider. Years ago, the teaching used to be that we were all handed a unique set of DNA blueprints, and this was the key to knowing and determining your health outcomes. It was as simple as whatever genes you got from your mom and your dad created your diseases that you were just simply going to get. We are finding out that that is only about 10 to 20% of the story. And for instance, out of the 23 pairs of chromosomes, there are 3 million possible combinations of those sequences, which is depending upon the location and the expression of those genes. So obviously, the other 80 to 90% of the story is the environmental influences and epigenetics. So what is epigenetics? Epigenetics is literally the environmental conditions above the genetics. Some of this is literally the environment that is outside, but also the environment just outside of the DNA. The DNA kind of reminds me of an electric cord, such that the inside portion of the electrical cord, which is the wiring, is the coiled up helical DNA itself. The outer portion, which is the rubber covering, actually holds the histones and the chromatin that hold the DNA in place. It's a kind of a very complex matter in which all of the outside signals talk to the DNA, which are actually through that cell membrane and through those histones that will cover and manage the DNA. Now, this will turn on and turn off different DNA switches. Some will liken it to the opening and closing of doors and windows through a receptor mechanism. And as I said, before you know it, there are 3 million possible outcomes for the same 23 pairs of chromosomes. So let's think of it this way. A blueprint, the DNA is a blueprint. And a blueprint is simply a guideline, and it is not very dynamic. It is just some prints on a piece of paper. It is stagnant. And for instance, that blueprint will not become a house until multiple action steps and processes have been taken. For instance, if you handed that blueprint to 20 different contractors, you would probably have 20 different looking houses in the bitter end. The differences would be based upon the contractor's interpretation, the materials that are available, the region or location of that house, and obviously the internal designer. Another example that comes to mind is for those of us women who have painted with a twist, we realize that at the end of our evening, there are multiple different paintings of the same theme, and not one single one is identical. So back to the individualized care and the epigenetics. Think think back to a time when you may have been given a medication for an illness, and possibly that medication made you feel sick in the stomach, made you have arthralgias, made you feel very sleepy, made you feel foggy in the brain. That same medication may have just simply been well tolerated to somebody else. That medication affected the epigenetics of the DNA and the way it may or may not have caused effects or side effects. In future group visits, we can certainly get down to the nitty-gritty of the DNA, the histones, the epigenetics, and the biochemistry of this. But suffice to say that 23andMe testing certainly does not account for your current health and your future health. I always hesitate when patients will ask me what I think about the genetic testing and whether or not I would recommend it. And again, it does not account for the environmental and the epigenetic influences on the DNA. And for instance, a lot of times I will use Alzheimer's as one of my examples. And there are several different places on the DNA that could potentially make you at risk for Alzheimer's. But what 23andMe and genetic testing doesn't necessarily account for is the histone, the protein influences, and the environmental factors that will actually give you a protective ability to not even turn the Alzheimer's gene on. So in other words, the way that you manage your lifestyle and your epigenetics may actually protect you from a disease. So the meat of what I'd actually like to talk to today is the environmental and the lifestyle pieces that can influence the health, the epigenetics, and basically our longevity. As a reminder, this is 80 to 90% of our health story, which is actually quite comforting because it is within our power to change and control. I will often talk about the blue zones to my patients, and the blue zones have been studied, and they are 5 designated areas in the world that have a very high population of 100-year-old individuals, and we call them centenarians. And on top of it, they are healthy 100-year-olds. Here are the 5 zones. We have Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, California, Okinawa, Japan, Icaria, Greece, and Sardinia, Italy. The researchers have found that there are some key components in their lifestyles that are thought to be attributable to their long lives. But as you will find out, the genetic makeup is quite varied in these areas, and the lifestyle is varied, but it is purported to be similar in some specific areas to the wellness. Some of the characteristics are, and again, each of these 5 areas of the world may have different regions, locales, but at this point, there are some conceptual issues that affect the epigenetics to keep them well. The first one I'd like to talk to is that they are typically whole foods and heavily plant-based. They may not entirely be vegetarian, but they have little to no animal products. Each region seems to be quite full of antioxidants and herbs, and a few of those zones have a high red wine intake as basically their antioxidant and polyphenols, certainly from the grape skin. However, one of those zones is alcohol-free. Another epigenetic factor is there are either some periods of fasting or certainly low-calorie states. This one is very important. There is an absence of obesity and no smoking. Each one of the regions may vary, but they all have incorporated in their day daily exercise. There is a strong sense of community cohesiveness. And to that note, there is also a sense of purpose in life. Each one of these zones has also been evaluated and felt to have the ability to deal with stress well. Each one of these zones has a strong spiritual basis. Interestingly, the elders and the centurions in these groups are actually quite valued, and many of them are working into their 90s. There's also a sense of strong family values. They also know the benefit of a positive outlook. And this is a lot of times forgotten or neglected by us Americans, but each one of these 5 zones was felt to be able to have good sleep. Now, if you take a moment to reflect about these said characteristics, you have to wonder how you measure up. And implicit in these characteristics is there is an absence of technology and an absence of modern life such as cars and TV. And I often like to remind my patients that we are vibratory beings, and we currently in America have quite a bombardment of EMF on a chronic, consistent, daily basis, which is something we will discuss in the future, and probably more and more and more as energy medicine is becoming much more known in the human body. I'd like to touch briefly on the food topic and to imply again that they had less refined carbohydrates and basically less food in general. I would like to note how these characteristics will play out quite differently for each group in their health and wellness, and it is actually individualized to the region, the types of food they're eating, actually the types of exercise, the types of religion, and the types of work. For instance, the spiritual base will range from the Seventh-day Adventist to Loma Linda, California, to the Greek Orthodox in Icaria, Greece. There is the Christian, primarily Roman Catholic in Sardinia, Italy. And then there is the Taoism and Buddhism that is observed in the Okinawa, Japan area. And where Costa Rica is concerned, we have a mixed Christianity. So let's get back to our own personalized, individualized medical approach to our health and wellness. And certainly we in America can try to improve on our epigenetics and health within our own values and within our own environment, and hence the individualized, personalized, holistic approach to health and wellness. First of all, I wholeheartedly believe that we need to have a high vegetative diet. And think of the ways that you would able to improve on that. Of course, now I as a physician have to keep a lot of things in mind, such as what are the food allergies? What are your food tolerances? What are your food likes? What is the availability of certain vegetables in certain environments? And maybe even to a degree, what is the ability in our region to prep some of this food such that it is palatable, consistent, and able to create less processing and cook in a whole foods concept. So again, that is individualizing to a patient's specific likes, dislikes, and tolerances. Okay, you have to brace yourself for this one. We basically need to eat less. We need to create more time for mini fasting states. And for instance, there are certainly fasting days where you could eat nothing and just drink water, but we can create the mini fasting state by waiting anywhere from 12 to 16 hours until our next meal. Or, years ago, we used to have a breakfast no longer than 8 hours. Why don't we try a breakfast 12 to 16 hours after our last meal? Do you, for instance, to eat less, are you somebody that needs a program to be able to do some caloric restriction rather than just the food itself? In your own daily living, how could we cut down obesity? And certainly, we need to stop smoking. The individualized approach to these topics needs to work with your lifestyle that suits you best. For instance, some people do well with acupuncture. Some people do well with hypnosis. Some people would like to do cold turkey or meditation or group-related projects. Let us try to figure out one of the other key factors that influences our epigenetics, and that is exercise. We need to personalize this in pursuit of your wellness. And how can we incorporate that exercise on a daily basis? For instance, is it built into your work? Are you coastal and actually enjoy the water sports and swimming? Or are you in a mountainous region where I am currently and can hike and observe nature? Do you like to work with animals? Do you like to coach a sport? Do you like to go to the gym or compete or do group fun sports? It is only going to work if it is going to work for you. Don't forget the community involvement that was high in the blue zones, the sense of community cohesiveness. How can we, as individuals, get a little bit more involved in the community? Is your local church something you're interested in? Again, do you like to coach? Do you like to sing in choral groups? Do you like to volunteer? Do you like to join community services such as the Lions Club? Do you like pet volunteering? Do you like volunteering in the schools or doing yoga or sports? Building community cohesiveness seems to have been one of the keys not only to current health and wellness in the blue zones, but actually felt to be part of the Darwinian survival of certain species. And again, that's another topic for another day. Strong family values obviously starts in the home. We can eliminate electronics. We can gather more. We can stay connected. We can have each other's back and have a sense of clan. And we can also extend that family to more than just our nuclear family and our genetic family. don't forget that one of the key components to health and wellness to influence our epigenetics wound up being good sleep, rich, restorative sleep. And how can we get more sleep? And to that note, increased sleep will help us do well and do better with stress. I like to often tell patients that when we get rich restorative sleep, this is when growth hormone is secreted at night. And for an average child, growth hormone at nighttime is obviously for growth. For us adult folks, when we get rich restorative sleep and that growth hormone is secreted, that is what is needed for cellular repair and cellular renewal. The work mentioned in the blue zones and the sense of purpose seems to have dramatically been a factor in their health and wellness. For instance, in Sardinia, Italy, some of the male centurions are still farming and still tending to the goats and still making the cheese to the area and are highly valued for their skill, expertise, and their previous contribution to the community throughout all of those years. And wouldn't it be nice for us to value our elderly as well? Don't forget that there was a mention of a lot of antioxidants and herbs that were abundant in these zones, and there was a lot of intake. So I will tell you, this is where 1 red wine per day may also contribute to your health and wellness, affect those epigenetics, and create a wellness platform to improve your longevity. So please note that when we were mentioning these blue zones, we really did not mention amounts of medications as being part of their health and wellness. Now, this may or may not be a part of your health plan and would certainly also need to be highly personalized between you and your physician and specifically attributable to your conditions and your lifestyle to affect those genes that, if done well, these medications can be kept to a minimal. I invite you to deeply think about your lifestyle and how it might be affecting your genetics at this time. There are so many topics within this topic that we can discuss in future group discussions. We haven't even talked about the genetics of all the bacteria that live on our skin and in our guts that actually contribute to our health and well-being. And we will have so many more discussions in the future. I hope that if you have any comments or suggestions, you could leave them in the comment box below so that we can discuss them for future topics. And until we meet again, be well. Again, I'm Natalie Kunsman, MD, and hopefully you have a healthful week ahead.